And I thought I would share a little bit about the past 2.5 years that I've been working at Cognoa and share a little bit about regulatory insights and how we realized that going for breakthrough designation was actually very, very helpful for our organization. So what we do at Cognoa is we work on digital precision diagnostics and therapeutics. And those do have an AI underlying, but I'm not really going to talk about that too much unless people really want it. And then if you cheer enough, I'll maybe talk about it. But I wanted to start with kind of this new category in the FDA. I don't know if just maybe actually show the room. Who is interested in actually or does work in diagnostics, therapeutics, putting products to market? Okay, so if you're not familiar, there is this new category of software as a medical device. So this is software only, and that software has to really is considered a device and not a mobile medical application based on what your claims are, right? So if you have the exact same software, but you don't claim to diagnose or treat anything, you are in this mobile medical app category, and there's much less restrictions and much less regulation that you have to deal with. The challenge of being in that space, though, is that you have basically, you're going to grind out your market. If you can get into a software as a medical device and you can make claims and you have the data to justify that your diagnostic or your therapeutic work in a way that is meets a minimum threshold from the FDA, what it does is it gets you into a market of traditional medicine. And obviously there's a factor increase there. So if you claim I can cure diabetes, right? Or I can help you manage your diabetes is very different, right? And those costs, the cost or the amount of revenue you can create is very different. So software as a medical device strictly means software that either diagnoses, so right, the claim, because what the regulatory agency does is they monitor your claims, safety, efficacy. And so in the SMA or SAMD kind of basis or framework, one of the things that can happen, though, is you can have an algorithm, an equation, or an AI learning platform underneath, which we do happen to have. This is not totally complete, so if you have a digital therapeutic and I missed you, I apologize. But what I did is I went back and I tried to look at what is the regulatory landscape from about 2017 to 2019 for this kind of new industry that's being developed, which we call digital therapeutics. And so prior to 2017, there was a couple different companies that had already received FDA clearance, including like WellDoc and Propeller, Proteus, which is the RFID chip. And then everyone was worried about why do you have an RFID chip in my antipsychotic. But anyway, so that stuff all happened pre-2017. And the FDA launched this kind of new product or this new program called the Digital Pre-Cert Pilot Program. And so Paratherapeutic was one of them. Apple was one of them that got in. And if you're not familiar with Paratherapeutic, they were granted a breakthrough designation for Reset-O, which is a therapy that's based on helping patients kick opioid addiction. They had already had previously gotten de novo clearance for Reset, which was non-opioid addiction. But what they had found, and I know the Par guys pretty well, is that breakthrough designation afforded them a level of conversation with the FDA that they previously didn't have. And so if I think about my own journey, when I first started as Chief Medical Officer at Cognoa, my CEO said, okay, great, welcome aboard. We need to submit a pre-sub to the FDA in 4 weeks. And I'm like, I've never done anything like that before. I know who the FDA is, but I've never interacted with them. So I learned very quickly that they can be very challenging. And the relationship that you have with the agency can go a long way. And so our first conversation, and I tell this publicly, was we got a letter from the FDA saying, thank you for your application. We don't consider that we need to regulate you. You don't need to keep your trip that you planned to come meet with us in the FDA. And that resulted in a phone call and no, we're going to come and we're going to talk to you about why we think we are a software as a medical device. And so that actually led us to a long conversation, which ultimately one of our proponents for pediatric care, Vasim Paris, at the FDA, and he is the head of pediatrics at the FDA, actually gave us the guidance and said, you may think about doing a breakthrough designation. And what that afforded us to do is basically have sprints with the FDA. So every 2 weeks, we can submit something to the FDA and get feedback on it. And so this was extremely helpful. We submitted for breakthrough designation for a diagnostic product, which we got in October of 2018. We're currently in our pivotal trial, and I'll tell you a little bit about why that helped us. And then we were able to, because of our benefit of that program, we realized very quickly that the therapeutic that we were working on, we also wanted to submit for breakthrough designation, and we were able to get that in January 2019. So what are the benefits of breakthrough status? Well, to get breakthrough status, you have to either be treating a serious or life-threatening condition. The indications for potential, there has to be an indication that is going to substantially improve the standard of care. And it allows you this expedited review by the FDA, and then you have this intensive FDA guidance to facilitate approval. So as you saw, I kind of highlighted, in this space, there's probably about 5 breakthrough designated devices. We've been very fortunate to have 2 out of those 5 breakthrough devices, which I think is also just helpful when you're talking to investors, for example. But we hope to be the first FDA-recognized medical device to actually enable a diagnosis for autism. There's currently no diagnostics for autism on the market. It's a clinical diagnosis. There are some CLIA labs that aren't FDA approved. So hopefully we'll be the first. And then if our therapeutic gets approved, we'll be the first that actually treats core symptoms of autism. There are no FDA-approved drugs for autism, with the exception of 2, Abilify and Risperidone, and they treat like irritability, and those are antipsychotics, so you'll get weight gain and all kinds of different problems with those. So after we had gotten FDA approval for the diagnostic, I'm going to skip through a little bit of this stuff because this is not really, you don't need to know this stuff. What we realized is that we were moving up our positive and negative predictive values. So we had worked with the agency to say PPV and NPV were the important endpoints for the clinical trial. And so we had our last FDA call, and they agreed on the clinical trial endpoints, the statistical plan, and all of that good stuff. And then you have to wait for the letter to come. And so instead of just sitting on my butt like I am now, because I'm a little bit tired and jet lagged and maybe I'm recovering from influenza, what we decided to do is say, okay, you know what? Why don't we do a full-scale pilot for our diagnostic? And I actually don't have those slides. So what we did is we employed a telemedicine model. We recruited patients through social media. We had about 2,600 patients that were interested in the trial in 5 weeks. We recruited and completed 500 patients in those five weeks. And the beautiful thing about working in software as a medical device is that, one, software in general, your cost approaches 0, right? There's a reason that Bill Gates is a billionaire, right? His software, it doesn't cost him that much after you make it the first time, right? And so what we did is because our software doesn't cost that much, right, to maintain, we're able to do that whole trial and basically de-risk this current pivotal trial that we're in because we were able to run the entire study within 5 weeks. Now, granted, you can say, well, why don't you already done with our 5-week trial now? Is because when you go through a real FDA trial, like they won't accept, we couldn't get them to accept a telemedicine visit as the diagnostic criteria, right? I have to have a site specialist see the kid in person. I have to send that to a central review panel. And then I have to have concordance between the central review panel, et cetera. So there's a lot more like just logistical nonsense that you have to do, but essentially a stripped down version could have been completed. And what it allows you to do is actually, which you can't do in pharma, right? You can't do a full-scale pilot of your biopharma agent, right, before you do the real clinical trial. So this was, again, one of the benefits that I think. And so if you are working in a space, my advice to you is, if you are eligible for breakthrough diagnosis, or breakthrough designation, excuse me, I would definitely recommend going through that and trying to get that certification or that level of degree, because again, it allows you to have these interactive conversations with the FDA. I'll show you just one other kind of just cool stuff that I think is pretty interesting, and I'll go into AI just a little bit. So in the therapeutic, for the diagnostic for 30 seconds, it just uses 3 inputs. It's really easy. It's a physician questionnaire, a caregiver questionnaire, and then uses home videos of the child to do, and then that gets plugged into a machine learning algorithm that was trained on about 30,000 samples, and then spits out autism, not autism. Okay, the therapeutic I think is super interesting. This is the fun part of medicine, so I'm still clinically active, but this is the stuff that I get to do on the side that I get to play with. So what we did is we took the work from Dennis Wall, who's our founder. He's over at Stanford. He was playing with Google Glass, which we're probably not going to use, or we actually aren't going to use. And what he figured out is that he could combine a facial algorithm that detects faces, a facial detection algorithm, and an emotion recognizer algorithm, and combine those two, and then give that up to kids on the autism spectrum. And if you've ever interacted with someone on autism spectrum, they don't do well with faces because they're hyper-connected. And so if you look at like facial recognition pathways, for example, this one is very abnormal, too hyper-connected compared to that one. So they can't do signal to noise very well. So what you can find is that by using an augmented reality layer, it allows those kids to actually grab the faces, so they see the faces, and then they start recognizing what those emotions are. To put this into perspective, in 6 weeks of using this augmented reality, we had a 5.5-point improvement in the adaptive behavior socialization scale. That's about 2 years worth of therapy. So if you put somebody in a two years of early intervention, you see about a 5-point improvement in their socialization. And the reason why is that if you've ever worked with kids on the spectrum, when I have my therapists work with these kids, they're trying to usually use like flashcards, and they're kind of like coming up to the kid. I'm going to use you as an example. Is that okay? And they're like, here, look at this happy face. And what he's doing is like, I don't care about happy faces. I want to look over here. So they're not really paying attention. So getting them to engage is very, very difficult. And then you have behaviors and things like that. So putting it into an abstraction layer in a game we call Egg Quest, and these kids run around, find the faces, and then they earn egg points, and the eggs open up stickers and all this stuff. But this therapy allows for that change to happen in a way that a therapist has a challenge doing. So that's what we've been working on. I'm going to show you a quick video if it works, maybe. Can you guys hit the play button real back there or no? Maybe I'll try it. Oh, is this? Okay, so I think the audio doesn't work, but this kid is about 3.5 years old. She is on autism spectrum. You can see what she's going to do. She's going to look away. She drops the phone. She doesn't want to play. She starts doing some stimming behaviors, look at something in the corner. Mom's like, no, 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 here, play the game for a second. And then what you're going to notice is mom's making the face, and then now watch here. This is just the second time she's using it. It's like you found the face. You get a smile and an eye interaction with that mom. That's pretty amazing on just this. Literally, this is the first time she's ever using it. Second time she got a face on the device, right? So what we found is just really, really engaging way to engage these patients. And then I'm going to say one last thing for 5 seconds. Digital therapeutics, software as a medical device, is a kind of a hard space, okay? And the reason that it's a little bit hard is that nobody knows how to get paid for these things, right? So Pear got approval, and 18 months later, they were still trying to figure out how to commercialize. One of the things that it's nice to not always be the first in line, right? Because you don't fall off the edge like the lemming, right? You go, oh, that was bad, don't do that. So what we did is instead of trying to get a CMS code, which is going to take me 5 years to do, instead of trying to create my own infrastructure, what we realized, and I'm not saying it's a good thing that we have this much complexity in the healthcare system, but this complexity exists. And so what we did is we had a deal with Eversana, and Eversana is a specialty pharmacy. So when I order IVIG for a patient, they're the type of people that fill that specialty pharmacy. And so what we were able to contract with them is, hey, listen, I don't have any biological overhead, right? So we were able to create a deal with Eversana that when a physician prescribes our med, it will be prescribed just like any other specialty pharmacy. It'll go to the hub. They will help dispense the medication. They have a bunch of contracts that I don't have to negotiate. And so I think sometimes you have to realize what your core competencies are. And in this case, my advice to anybody who's trying to do this kind of get your product to market is find an existing partner who is like a specialty hub pharmacy, et cetera, because they will make your life much, much easier. So I'm looking to be hopefully successful in this space very shortly. That's it. All right, thank you very much.